Welcome to the My Tennis Coaching Podcast, your go-to resource for all things tennis coaching. Your host is Steve Whelan. Here, we dive deep into ecological dynamics and constraint-led coaching practices. Whether you're a seasoned coach or just starting out, this podcast is designed to build your confidence, expand your knowledge, and refine your techniques. Join me as we challenge traditional methods, explore player-centered approaches, and transform your coaching experience. Let's take your coaching game to the next level together. Stay tuned for insightful discussions and practical tips that will make a real difference on and off the court.
What truly makes a great tennis player? Welcome, as always, to mytenniscoaching.com. I'm your host and founder of My Tennis Coaching Podcast, Steve Whelan. I hope you're all well. And I get asked this question a lot. What truly makes a great tennis player? Now, from the perspective of a traditional coach, a lot of tennis coaches, players, parents believe, and spectators believe that to be a great tennis player, you need great technique. And that's why you see so many tennis lessons focus on technique, perfection, and hitting the ball as well as you can. But in this podcast and today's episode, we are going to look at what truly makes a good tennis player from a holistic and a bit more science-backed approach. And obviously, we're going to explore ecological dynamics. Over the next few minutes, we're going to explore that it's not just about hitting the perfect forehand, but how players interact with their environment, how they perceive opportunities on the court, and how they solve complex problems that tennis throws at them. And I think if you ever look at any top tennis player, they are unbelievable problem solvers. They're really good at making the right decision at the right time, sometimes known as shot selection if you listen to Wimbledon or currently the US Open. Obviously, we perceive they have unbelievable technique, but we're going to look at why they've got such what appears to be great timing and great technical prowess. And by the end of the episode, hopefully you have a new understanding of play development and one that emphasizes perception, adaptability, and real-time decision-making over repetitive technical skills. So I mentioned at the very start of the podcast, if you are new to the podcast, I talk a lot about ecological dynamics. What is ecological dynamics? So ecological dynamics combines ecological psychology and dynamical systems theory. It emphasizes that players don't perform in isolation, but instead they interact with their environment. The focus on how they perceive opportunities, known as affordances, in their surroundings, and they act based on these perceptions. Traditional methods or old school coaching generally focus on technical perfection, isolated basket drills, but ecological dynamics focus on how the player adapt to the ever-changing environment during matches. It's less about correct technique and more about adaptability, perception, action coupling, and problem solving. Traditional tennis coaching, you'll see an awful lot. Coach gets a basket of balls, player stands and hits 100 forehands in a row, and the coach is trying to get them to repeat the same action over and over again with the belief that action, that technique, will transfer into a match situation. But we know that tennis is a receiving and sending game. Generally speaking, apart from the serve, the ball is coming towards the player. And coaches will look at things like timing, anticipation. One concept that really gets talked about in tennis coach education or tennis lessons or by tennis coaches is the perception action coupling. So the perception action coupling is one of the core principles of ecological dynamics. In tennis, it means the players are constantly perceiving cues like the ball, their opponent, their own position, but also the environment around them as well. Things like changes of the wind, the sun, everything in and around the player, the environment, has an impact on their perception. And that also will then have an impact within their decision making. For example, in tennis, a player will look at their opponent's body language and try and anticipate where the ball will go. Things like closed and open stance, that will give the player a cue of potential direction of the ball. Though then, what's the flight of the ball as well, in terms of the height, the speed, the direction, the depth. But then they'll also start to take consideration things like the wind. If the wind is against them, they're going to have to anticipate the ball may slow down. If the wind is going for them as their opponent, the ball may speed up. So think of a player like Nadal. His ability to adapt during the point isn't just due to his physical fitness or technical ability. He has a very keen awareness of his environment. He will read his opponent's movements. Believe it or not, tennis players don't have time to think. The average time between contact of the ball to you, anywhere between 1 and 1.5 seconds. The brain can't compute all that information, but what it does and what the body does, it looks at the environment around it and then it tries to find the best movement solution in that situation. It doesn't have a pre-programmed list of commands, and this is where we get coaching wrong so much. We think that players can just go into the brain, pick out a command, transfer it to the situation, but the body is a bit more complex than that. And sometimes it's as simple as the body will react to what's in front of it based on the task it's trying to conduct or trying to achieve. And that's where affordances come into it. So affordances is a term that at first I didn't quite understand when I looked at ecological dynamics. But affordances refer to the opportunities for action that the environment offers the player. So a great tennis player is consistently or constantly attuned to these affordances. They're seeing opportunities to attack, defend, move into space based on what the situation allows. They're constantly scanning for information. They're always looking. And again, they're not just focusing on the ball. And then within a lot of coach education and coach development, within a lot of coaching lessons, coaches are constantly tell the players to read the ball. But there's so much more information that the player needs to take in. Like we said before, their opponent's position, their own position, also the environmental conditions as well. So good tennis players aren't just hitting shots. They are tactically placing themselves on the court to try and exploit opponents' weaknesses. And you'll see this a lot with the top players. They'll cheat their position. They'll hit the ball cross-court deep. And they'll know roughly that the ball's not going to go down the line. So they'll start to hang out wide to make sure they get the ball on the forehand. Again, they are reading the situation. They are reading their opponent's position, the ball they've just hit, the potential opportunities that their opponent or affordances that the opponent might be able to hit as well. And they're constantly adapting in real time to the situation. Within a lot of tennis coaching lessons, we see this as repetition. 2 cross 1 line, cross-court forehand, short ball down the line. We believe that we practice these, what we call patterns of play. And a lot of coaches push back on me, say, yeah, that's hypersensitive tennis. And it's true. But what I would hit cross-court, Federer would be hit down the line. What I would attack down the line with topspin, you may attack down the line with slice. So by giving players patterns of play, we're actually limiting them. We're actually holding them back because we're not allowing them to create their own see their own affordances. What we need and what I truly look for in a great tennis player is adaptability. Most traditional tennis coaching focus on very repetitive drills to build what they perceive as muscle memory. Now we know that muscles don't have memory, and I mentioned earlier in the podcast that the brain itself doesn't just pull out a list of commands based on the situation or what it's trying to achieve. The body is constantly adapting. You now listen to this podcast. If you're driving your car, you are literally adapting to the environment around you. You're taking in all the information. The other cars, pedestrians, traffic lights, zebra crossings. You're taking in all that information. Your body is reacting and controlling the car based on that. You're not actually thinking about how you're driving. Your body is just reacting and using the tools like it's learned to react in real time. If you're walking, listen to this podcast, your body is constantly adapting because you're not walking on the same type of ground. You're going to change from walking on a pavement to then going up steps to walking up a hill, walking downhill, walking on uneven ground. Your body is constantly adapting in real time to the task at hand. It's not just being programmed. You're not AI just yet. You are adapting to what's around you. That's what we call adaptability. So when we're looking to develop tennis players, because it's so unpredictable and so chaotic and so wild, our training, our coaching has to focus on adaptability, not repetition, because players need to be able to hit multiple different versions of a forehand, not a single forehand. And I think if we incorporate more variability into our training sessions, this will then develop the adaptability. Instead of drilling the same forehand over and over again, create drills that challenge players to hit different forehands based on different conditions. And this is where I've talked a lot about basket drilling. Basket drilling is useful in very specific circumstances. And you'll see a lot of top players maybe basket drill, but that might be a case of they've got practice or time constraints, or they're working on something very specific. The vast majority of us mere mortals who are working with recreational or developing junior tennis players, we need to give them more versatile weapons. The top players top players are already very adaptable, very versatile. They already have multiple different shots. That's where they can almost go into that 1% sort of area and work on something very specific. And that's where constraint-led coaching comes in. So a constraint-led approach is one great way to build adaptability. By trying to modify the task or the environment, like changing the court size, introducing different rules, it can really force your players to adapt and solve problems literally in the moment. And if you go across to mytenniscoaching.com or My Tennis Coaching on YouTube, you'll see quite a lot of constraint-led coaching drills. And then a lot of tennis coaches will always push back, and some of you will go, yeah, but what's the basics? Surely you need to learn the basic forehand. Surely you need to learn the coordination. Now, in ecological dynamics, we focus really on trying to synchronize the movement of what the environment demands. So a good tennis player has to coordinate their footwork, their body work in live action, in the dynamics of a match. So doing a ladder drill is pretty much pointless. So getting your players to run through ladders 20, 30 minutes every day, they'll get very good at running through a ladder. It's very unlikely that skill is going to transfer into a tennis court. Again, we think if we develop these skills in isolation, they transfer to the match. But like we've covered already, the body adapts to what the environment presents. And in tennis, there's a ball, there's an opponent, and you've got to hit the ball. Doing a ladder drill to work on your coordination or your footwork, it won't transfer very well into a tennis match. So again, great tennis players aren't just explosive. They're very economical. They're trying to conserve energy by moving efficiently and effectively. They're trying to not waste energy. So again, a great example of this is a split step. We believe the split step is so important, and we encourage teaching the split step at red under 8 level. The court is ridiculously small. A red player can cover the court quite quickly in 2 or 3 steps. They don't need to split step. Plus the ball's really slow. They don't have to be really explosive. So again, a lot of coaches will be teaching a split step because they believe that the players need it. At red, you probably don't need it. As the game gets quicker and their opponents get stronger, you're going to have to move a lot more efficiently and effectively. Therefore, you're going to have to learn to transfer your weight and make sure you can have an explosive first step. So when we talk about developing shapes and footwork and bodywork, we've got to understand that the best way to learn those things is actually through the game. And people say to me, yeah, but low to high is a common one. Everyone hits the ball low to high. So surely you have to teach low to high, knees to trees. I can't remember the other one that I heard this week. But surely you've got to teach them how to swing low to high. Well, it depends, doesn't it? It depends on the ball you're giving. Some tennis balls, I actually swing side to side. I'll go a lot flatter through the ball. If I'm pushed all the way back behind the baseline, I go low to high quite a lot. I don't quite go as much low to high if I'm on the baseline. It really depends, again, on the situation, on the context. And humans are generally quite clever. We understand that the ball has to go over the net. So we understand basic physics. So the body will adapt based on what it's trying to achieve anyway. But just getting the player to repeat a low to high action will actually won't have that much effect. Because again, we're decoupling, we're taking away the perception of the environment to the action, the technique. So when we talk about coordination and the basics, footwork, racket work, body work, like we've just talked about, by doing that in isolation, science will show us that it doesn't transfer very well. But then we have problem solving. I mentioned before that one of the biggest problems in tennis is you have an opponent. And your opponent is a highly adaptable, versatile, and they will change during the match. And you as a player, or your players, if you're a coach, you're going to be given lots of problems to solve. And those problems are going to change and adjust during the course of a match. So when you're practicing in isolation, you're hitting forehand after forehand after forehand. Great, but there's no problem to solve there. Because after 2 or 3 shots, you've solved the problem. In a match, I want to try and get you off balance. I want to try and push you out wide. I want to try and make you feel rushed. I want to make you feel panicked. I want to make you feel anxious. And I'm going to do lots of different ways. I'm going to try that in lots of different ways. So again, think about a tennis match. It's just a series of problems. And to be a really good tennis player, you can't rely on pre-programmed strategies. I'm going to hit the ball cross-court in this position. I'm going to hit the ball down the line there. Because it might not suit the environment you're in. It might not suit the opponent you're playing against. To be a great tennis player, instead of trying to just stick into technique and stick into patterns of play, as tennis coaches, as a tennis coach, I'd really explore you to try different shot selections, try different shots from different positions, try different movements. And I've got to try and get you to practice all them in training. I've got to try and make the practice court as representative and as real as a match court as I can. But then also I've got to give them freedom to experiment. I've got to give them time to work things out. I've got to be patient and allow them to make mistakes. What truly makes a great tennis player? It's not great technique. It's not having a great fundamentals or basics. To be a truly great tennis player, they have to be dynamically engaged with their environment. They have to consistently perceive and act based on what's in front of them. So how can we help them as tennis coaches? Or if you're listening to this, a parent, or if you're a player yourself? Train that perception action coupling. Never decouple perception and action. Also, when you work on your perception, don't let the coach tell you when to prepare. Don't let the coach tell you when to move. They're taking away the perception action. Try and focus on affordances or opportunities. Look for them. When you make mistakes, ask yourself why. What influenced you in making that mistake, or what influenced you into making that decision? Why did you go down the line in that situation? Why did you decide to attack the ball in that situation? Was it your opponent's position? Was it your position? Was it how you felt? Try and build adaptability by varying and looking at the constraint-led approach. Again, head over to mytenniscoaching.com. Lots of information on there. My Tennis Coaching on YouTube. Lots of videos on there as well you can look at. And ultimately, great tennis players are unbelievably creative. They're great problem solvers. And they're very unique. They literally will work things out for themselves. So there you have it. Hopefully you enjoyed this new style of podcast. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it. Hopefully some of it resonated with you and you want to learn a little bit more about ecological dynamics. Highly recommend you check out the Perception Action podcast by Rob Gray. Check out the Talent Equation by Stuart Armstrong. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please check out those podcasts. They are truly legends and they know much more about the science than I do. I'm just a coach and coach educator. And then next week, we're going to look at building mental skills by using these same principles. As always, please check out mytenniscoaching.com. Share the podcast with your players, your coaches, your parents. And until next time, have a great week.
Thank you for tuning in to the My Tennis Coaching Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an update. Your support helps us bring more insightful discussions and valuable tips to enhancing your coaching journey. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at MyTennisCoaching for daily inspiration, coaching advice, and behind-the-scenes content. Stay connected, stay inspired, and keep pushing the boundaries of your coaching skills. Until next time, keep fostering growth, innovation, and excellence on and off the court. See you in the next episode.